It's one of the things that I think is so liberating about extinction on TSM compared to like dedicated abstinent people, is that I can go into those environments and not get triggered now. I can have alcohol around my house. I enjoy Scotch whiskey. I have a very nice bottle of it that I haven't opened in 2 months. It's just sitting in my cabinet and it's not calling to me, and I don't have to white knuckle my way around it. It's like I can say, hey, I'll get with you at some point in the future. I don't feel like drinking you today.
Okay, welcome everybody. Today I'm here with Eric, and this is actually the second time Eric has been on for an interview with me. What was it? About 8 months ago, you did an interview with me when you were only 4 months into your Sinclair Method journey. And we were just chatting before I hit record, like I've been along your journey almost since the very beginning. So it's been really awesome for me to see you kind of progress and observe the ups and downs that you've been through and the different tools and strategies you've tried. And I was just telling you before we hit record too, that I'm like, you're like the ideal TSM patient, just because I feel like you have such a perseverant spirit. And I've seen you go through the depths that a lot of people do. And it's so easy to get discouraged and throw in the towel. But I've seen you keep this kind of fighting spirit the whole time. And I know you told me it hasn't always been easy, but it's been really cool to just be alongside you for that. So welcome, Eric. Just thank you so much for chatting with me again today.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Thanks for that. It certainly has been quite the journey with ups and downs, and despairing that maybe this isn't going to work for me. Something that happens a lot. When I look at the peer support groups, that's a common thought that people have. I certainly had it multiple times over the year that I've been doing TSM. So yeah, it's good to have the support of people around you to try and keep that up. It's harder to do in isolation.
Oh yeah, it's so true. And I was just telling you, and I was actually, maybe I'll get your thoughts on this, because every week I get a couple of emails or messages from people who've been on TSM either a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and they feel really discouraged because they're saying, oh, I'm not, seeing this huge change. Maybe this isn't going to work for me. And I had someone this past week tell me, I see all these posts about people who get an instant response and it's not happening for me. Like, what's wrong? And so you've been on the method for a year. So you've been at it for a long time. I'm curious what you would say for people who might be watching this right now. Maybe they're just a couple weeks or a couple months in and they're not where they want to be. And like, what type of expectations you think these types of individuals should have, knowing that, you've kind of already been through the first year of TSM.
Yeah. I think the big thing is that I kept a log for the entire year that I was doing TSM, and that allowed me to be able to see what was actually happening. And it certainly didn't look like a whole lot of stuff was happening, in the early months. That was before I had addressed a lot of issues. I was taking the medication compliantly. That one was something that was consistent over the course of the year. But everything else was not consistent. My approach towards things, sticking with plans, etc. There's never a perfection of that. And so I guess the big thing is that you're going to have weeks when something takes you by surprise in your everyday life. Like something's going to distract you. Like, just get through it by being compliant and don't worry about the rest of it. Like, okay, yeah, maybe I know sometimes people have an event happen to them, or maybe you're just down in the doldrums for some reason, and if you don't stick to your exact plan, then it's not a failure. And that was one of the big things for me. Is I actually at the start of my year, I was working with a alcohol and substance abuse problem or therapist. And one of the big things that she opened my eyes to by working one-on-one with her was to acknowledge when I had successes. And I know this is something that you talk about in the Thrive community, with respect to the small wins. Like, hey, go ahead and look at the small win of whatever that is. And so it's like, well, okay, yeah, I drank a lot on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And she's like, but you didn't drink anything on Wednesday. I'm like, no, I didn't drink anything on Wednesday. And she's like, but you did drink on Wednesday the week before, right? I'm like, yeah. And so I would grudgingly accept that I had done something good, despite feeling bad about myself. And so looking at those small wins, like, even if you can reduce your drinking by 10 or 20%, that's 10 or 20%. That's a big thing. And recognize that you're making progress, no matter how speedy it is. As long as you're on the right trend, you eventually get to where you want to be.
Absolutely. And I'm just recalling back to a post I think you shared in the Thrive community, I think it was, where you shared your drink log, and it had lots of ups and downs and lots of activity on it. And you were like saying, I could look at this and see all of those days where I drank way too much, or I can also look at this and see all of the days where I wasn't drinking, or like see these positive trends. And so it was interesting for me to hear you share that, because you can look at the same data and set of information and perceive it in two different ways. And so has that been a challenging mindset shift for you as you've been on this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people talk about optimists and pessimists as, seeing the glass half full or half empty. And for me, when I started this journey, like, unless the glass was completely full, then I was not satisfied. Is like, it was, I could do like 9 things right, and I'd focus on the one thing wrong. And, one of the things that I've learned over time is that's a, that's kind of a natural way that, people wind up reacting to things, is that, we are self-critical. And one of the big things was trying to have my internal dialogue match the empathy that I would have for another person. Is that the things that I would say to myself with my self-talk about I'm a horrible person, I have no willpower, I'm doomed, this and that. Like, would I ever say that to somebody else? If somebody had like drank more heavily than they intended to the weekend before, would I say you're a failure to them? I wouldn't. So I had to learn not to say that to myself.
Eric, that's something that I so relate to on my own Sinclair Method journey, because I was at a point where I really had to learn how to respect myself, because I'd been disrespecting myself so much with over drinking. And I had to visually imagine it was my mom or my sister or my friend and be like, how would I treat them now? Because I literally didn't know how to respect myself. And with that, I kind of like learned and gained these skills. But I just so relate to what you're saying. And I think a lot of people watching probably will as well, because alcohol can be this totally self-destructive thing that removes our self-respect. And so it's so easy, we talk a lot about habit change and lifestyle change with the Sinclair Method, but like we have to change our thought habits as well, because it can be autopilot of just negative, destructive thinking.
Yep, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you another thing that just popped into my mind that you brought up on one of our live group calls like a month or two ago, and you said something around like black or white thinking, and how that kind of fits into that similar type of thing. And especially with recovery, it's like we tend to view it as this black and white construct. And maybe because of like with AA, you're either sober or you're in a relapse. And so with TSM, it's like you're either doing really well and doing things perfectly and having great alcohol-free days and great extinction sessions, or you're a complete failure or something. So did you want to share a little bit about how, what that is and how that's applied to your own Sinclair Method journey, that like understanding of more like black and white thinking and how that can be kind of harmful for us?
Yeah, absolutely. All or nothing thinking is a real, it's definitely something that I think that anybody going through, this or any other self-improvement process, really should learn about that kind of cognitive part of things. And it's always been a part of my personality. And so trying to change that isn't easy. It takes time, to really look at stuff as saying, okay, well, like you can be all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at the beginning of the week and say, you know what, I'm going to have 5 alcohol-free days every night from Sunday through Thursday. And then I will be guaranteed not to be hungover when I go to work, or I will be guaranteed to, to be able to, have this wonderful experience. And then like, maybe you only make it until Thursday. but you made it until Thursday. So instead of saying, well, I failed, like, then, well, okay, maybe you made one of the exercises that I did, with my therapist was give yourself a grade. Like, there wasn't a single one, very few tests in university did I manage to score 100%. So why wouldn't I be satisfied with 90? Why wouldn't I be satisfied with 6 out of 7 days where I stuck to my plan? And even when I didn't stick to my plan, this is another thing about black or white thinking, or all or nothing thinking, is that once somebody breaks a seal, there's a tendency, at least for me, to say, well, that's it. Might as well drink the house down because I've already lost. And it's like, no, no, somebody scored a goal. It doesn't mean that you forfeit the game, and so you keep playing. And then you go, okay, well, and some of the most encouraging stories that I've seen in support communities is when somebody, first of all, says, hey, I broke down and I had 2 glasses of wine, but then I stopped. And it's like the all or nothing thinking, your addictive voice is trying to tell you, you already failed, might as well make the most of it. And of course, what we want to do is to try and do that and accept, like, okay, one of the things that I say frequently is, if you don't feel like you're ready for an alcohol-free day, how about an alcohol-free hour? How about you just wait until 7 instead of 6, or whatever your normal time is? You can do 60 minutes. Like, if the 24 hours seems daunting to you, and for daily drinkers and for regular binge drinkers, that can seem like a mountain to climb. But if you can just delay for a little bit longer, then you prove that you've got some control back. And so a lot of this process for me was to keep doing things that would demonstrate to myself that I had control and that I was regaining control, because that's part of what Naltrexone and TSM does for you, is it gives you that control back. And so recognize when you exercise it and celebrate it, no matter what the scope is. Like, you did something that you weren't doing 2 months ago. You wouldn't have been able to stop at all, but now you did.
Yes, it's so true. I love the concept of giving yourself a grade, because like we can do so well all week long. And I see this in our Thrive community as well, where I just see someone's on a roll, they're posting about their goals, hitting their goals, and then they have one sloppy day or one mess up day, and they're just like beating themselves up, or they're so hard on themselves. But it's like, we forget that whole week. And so opening it up for a larger perspective of, like, that's why we focus on the small wins and things like that. It's like, okay, what is going well, and accepting the fact that screw ups and mistakes are just an inevitable part of the process. Like, nobody's going to get out of this journey without mistakes along the way.
That's right. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I think the TSM community, and especially the Thrive community, really tries to focus on, as opposed to, I've been a member and continue to be a member and get great value out of other groups that are shifted more towards abstinence and so forth. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of that. It's just a different mindset. And it's helpful. It was helpful for me to expose myself to that side, because it helped balance out, my past history. It gave me a different thing to think about, in terms of my alcohol-free days in particular, because that's where I was aligned with them. Is when I chose to be alcohol-free, then I had a lot of the same kinds of things going on that the abstinence crowd focuses on. But then every once in a while, I'd see a post pop up, well, I was alcohol-free for 79 days, and I accidentally had a sip of a beer that wasn't mine. It was sitting on a table, and I'm distraught about it. I'm losing my mind. It's like, look, you accidentally drank a little bit of alcohol. Like, you haven't done anything wrong. And even if you had done that on purpose, you shouldn't feel that horrible. And I think that that's one of the things that, that I very much love about the Thrive community, whether it's the, online posts and giving support that way, or one-on-one messages, or, in the calls, support calls, the group Zoom calls, is that, we don't have that undercurrent of, I'm a miserable failure and I have to start back at day one. I don't think that's super helpful for most of the people on TSM to think in those kind of black and white terms of, okay, well, now I've just hit the reset button and I have to erase the 90 days that I had and start again.
Yeah, it's so true. And there is some like deconditioning that has to be done with that. And we actually have a course video on that because we have so many people coming from AA who are like feeling guilty that they're drinking on the Sinclair Method, or feeling guilty that they overdrank the night before, even though again, like they've been doing really well. It's just, there is some, yeah, it's a mindset shift really. So you've been on the method for a year. Is it like a year to the date today? I mean, it's April 4th that we're recording this.
It's not precisely, but it was towards the end of March last year that I began. And so I was thinking about that a lot when we had talked about the idea of doing, another interview. And I said, well, this is kind of a neat time to do it because not only is a year and interesting from a perspective of the way that we keep track of anniversaries in this world, but also because it's kind of a common and significant period of time for people on TSM, is that there's like you were alluding to before, there's relatively few people who do TSM for 2 months and they're like, haha, that did it for me, I'm good to go. For most people, it's a much longer journey, whether that's 6, 9 months, 12 months. 12 months is not at all uncommon. I'm sure you have seen people who have been making progress, who have been better off than they were, but they're, a year and a half or 2 years in, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Everybody's an individual, and, everybody has different things that they need to overcome in terms of behavior and the brain chemistry and surroundings. There's a whole lot of different things that are going to change that period of time. But it's not uncommon to hear people say that their journey lasted a year or a year and a half. That seems to be like, near the sweet spot.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's just funny you said, like, I don't think there's hardly anybody that I can even think of 2 months on TSM and they're like, haha, that was funny that you said that. But the year is kind of the marker. And I think having that mindset going into it allows you to have realistic expectations, so you're not freaking out 4 months and wondering if it's working. So my question for you, Eric, because a year is kind of like the spot where a lot of people are getting close to extinction. Where are you at on the extinction path?
I'm prepared to say that I've reached extinction at this point.
Yay, that is so cool. I have like 12 more questions.
Good to say it.
Yeah. That is so cool.
Yeah, and it was interesting because there's kind of a for me, it almost feels like a rite of passage type thing, like, getting your diploma or your first car, or like, it's going to be one of those things where I'm like, aha, I remember when I reached extinction. And I think that, for me, it was, again, trying to avoid all or nothing thinking, is that I was very nervous about the idea of declaring extinction or believing myself to be extinct, pharmacologically speaking, and as far as my brain chemistry is concerned, because it's still possible for me to overdrink. And there was a part of me that was saying, well, have you really reached extinction if you can still get drunk? And it's like, well, yeah, I think you can, because it's about your attitudes, and it's about, how your brain is reacting. I will always stay compliant. There's no sense. I don't graduate, get my diploma, and move on with my life. It's like, I have to be careful. And that was another reason, like, hey, if I declare extinction, am I going to become complacent? Am I going to start thinking like, hey, well, I got everything sorted out now, and maybe it wasn't really the brain chemistry. Maybe it was really just that you had emotional problems that you've dealt with. Like, the addictive voice never really disappears entirely. And so there was a part of me that said, am I letting my guard down if I consider myself to be extinct?
Interesting. So how are you defining extinction? Like, how do you know that you're at that place right now. And just for people watching, extinction does not mean abstinence. That confuses a lot of people on the method. Extinction essentially means your brain has been restored to the state it was in before alcohol use disorder. People can still drink, most people still do, but it's from a place of conscious decision of, hey, I'm gonna have a couple drinks with friends tonight, not like, oh my gosh, I gotta race to the liquor store and get my bottle of vodka kind of thing. So how has your experience been, and how do you define extinction in your own journey?
Yeah. For me, it was a lot of, what do I still have to work on? Like, as long as I still had, a potential trigger or this or that, then I would have felt, and it wasn't that long ago. It was probably a month ago that I wound up drinking quite a lot for like 3 days in a row. I had an intense, emotional kind of personal thing going on, and I just kind of slid into that for those days. And so I'm like, wow, does that mean that I still have a lot of things to work on? It's like, not really. Like, yes, I hope that I'll use that as a learning experience, right? Which is what I learned, to think of those heavy drinking days. They're not failures, they're learning experiences. And what I learned from that is that I needed to use the tools that I had, is that I needed to do things like journaling or exercise or something else. And in that particular case, I didn't do it. That could easily happen to me, like, in 6 days, 6 weeks, or 6 months, or 6 years, right? Is that, the right set of circumstances could come up, and I could find myself, having drank heavily for a couple of days. That wouldn't mean that I'm not still extinct. It just means that I drank a lot. Like, kind of like people who haven't yet developed AUD can have a heavy drinking night. In certain nights of the year, somebody might not drink much at all year, and then they go out on New Year's and they get up in the morning feeling regret. And so that doesn't mean that I've got to start all over or anything else. As long as I remain compliant, I will never not have naltrexone on my keychain, is that it will always be with me. And I know that was something that sunk into me, hearing other people, who had reached extinction. Like, that's the part that I don't fool with. Whether they've gotten to a point where they prefer abstinence, or whether they are happy moderating. And I think that's one of the big things, is that it became very comfortable for me to be in the most, my biggest challenge was in the social environment where everybody else is drinking. I'm at like my home bar where I feel the most comfortable. I have constant new friends wandering in and out. And over the past couple of weeks, I've gone into that environment several times, had 2 or 3 alcoholic drinks, and left. And I'll start out with non-alcoholic drinks. I'll pop in there, and I'll start with that, and then I'll be like, okay, well, I'll do this. I know I would mention to somebody else recently, I was describing an experience. I'm like, I had 2 alcoholic drinks and I just wasn't feeling it. So then I switched back over to non-alcoholic, without leaving. And they were astonished. They were like, what, you can do that now? I'm like, yeah. I'm asking myself, hey, what am I going to get out of like a third or a fourth? And it's one of the things that I think is so liberating about extinction on TSM, compared to like dedicated abstinent people, is that I can go into those environments and not get triggered now. I can have alcohol around my house. Like I enjoy Scotch whiskey. I have a very nice bottle of it that I haven't opened in 2 months. It's just sitting in my cabinet, and it's not calling to me, and I don't have to white knuckle my way around it. It's like I can say, hey, I'll get with you at some point in the future. I don't feel like drinking you today.
I just hope that you actually talk to your whiskey. That's for another conversation. Eric's talking to the whiskey again. Here we go. No, one of the things I have loved about following your journey is that you have been, posting, especially like I've seen a lot in the Thrive community. You'll post just like a long reflective post when you make mistakes, or when you're in social environments like that, where you're like, last night I was in this setting and I chose to have alcohol drinks, and then I switched to non-alcoholic beer, and really taking us through like the whole journey of what was going on in your mind. And so it's really awesome to see that. But I think that that is like it's a skill that requires developing. I think at the broadest level, I would just call it like mindfulness on the Sinclair
Yeah.
method. And I wondered if you wanted to talk more about your approach to the method, using that as one of your tools, like the mindfulness and the reflection, and how that has contributed to your success in reaching extinction.
Yeah, definitely. It's, I guess the idea is, behind mindful drinking is like doing anything mindfully. It's being present in that moment. And so one of the common examples is like the idea that you've got a beer in your hand or within easy reach, and you're watching TV or a movie, and you drink it down, and you're like, hey, I guess my beer is empty. You don't remember drinking any of it. Like, that's the complete opposite of mindfulness, right? Is that you're just going through the motions, like on autopilot. And mindfulness is, I'm going to sit and I'm going to say to myself, okay, I'm choosing to take a drink of this right now, and paying attention to, what does it taste like? Do I actually like the taste of this thing that I'm drinking, or don't I? Am I in the mood for this? And being able to, really, be conscious of those things. I know that, towards the end, one of the things that I would do is I would go to a bar. Instead of having my regular beer, I would pick one at random. And so, because it wasn't one that I normally had, then I wanted to pay attention to it. I would say like, oh, what does this taste like? And how is all that how is all that working for me? What is even something as simple as, what does the label look like? And all of those things become pathways, because we learn how to do certain things on autopilot, right? It's like most people driving to work have done it so many times, they don't consciously think about it. It just kind of happens. You're thinking about what you're going to make for dinner when you get home, or what you're going to do once you get to work. You're not thinking about which turn is next. It's automatic. And so I think, when for me, having been in the group of AUD, everything was automatic about drinking for me. Like, there was never even a thought that popped into my head that I would go to, a festival like I did this weekend and not drink, which is what I did. It's all my friends are lining up in the 20-minute beer line, and I'm like, do I want a beer that badly? I don't. I'm perfectly happy going to the soda line, which is much shorter. And the degree to which you're making a choice, and that can be making a choice in a longer term. Like, I know one of the things that has come up in the Thrive community is kind of making your plan for the week. Like, what do I want out of this week? And that's the start of mindfulness, is, what do I want out of this week? Like, for some people early on, it might just be, I'm going to be compliant, and that's my entire plan for the week. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm going to be compliant and log my drinks. Okay, well, that's a little more mindful, because now you have to notice the drink enough to mark it down. Right. So that's kind of the start of it. And then, going through the lines, and, really, for me, different things like comparing, a non-alcoholic version of something, is that I've come to really enjoy a lot of high quality non-alcoholic beers, to the point where I kind of prefer them to an awful lot of the alcoholic versions. They're just a better, tastier beverage for me. And before, that would have been nuts. It's like, but now that I'm paying attention, now that I'm mindful, it's like, hey, wait a minute, this tastes great. And since I'm not trying to get buzzed, I'm not trying to drown anything out, right? Then I can just choose based on what I want.
Yep, absolutely. And you mentioned like trying to get buzzed, and something has come up recently is like the challenge of people still chasing the buzz, even on naltrexone, and kind of like still turning to alcohol in that way to get drunk and numb out. And I know like you've had experiences with that, like not too far in the past, even as you've approached extinction. And so what have you learned, or like, what insights do you have to share, I guess, about like the experience of chasing the buzz on naltrexone and maybe like strategies you've used to overcome that?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think I hear that commonly, and I think that, I experienced it to a certain extent, and the way that it always manifested for me is in not having a plan. That was kind of how I learned to recognize when I was going to potentially chase, my old behavior, my old habits, that sort of thing is, okay, well, I'll go in and I'll have some alcohol. And then it's like, well, because I didn't have any kind of plan in place, like anything goes. And so it's like, oh, well, I fell back into those patterns of like, okay, well, of course I'm going to have a whiskey with my beer, and you wind up seeing this. It's funny that now that my awareness and my mindfulness is awakened, you become more aware of how other people are drinking around you, and the people who are chasing the buzz is like you'll see somebody at a bar who is always going to have a shot and a beer, and he's going to drink them both, and then he's going to get another shot and a beer because he's trying to be on the most accelerated path to get what his brain wants, right? Is that, this lady over here is gonna get the double, right? One of the things I learned is that no drink made as a double tastes better. It's not. It's not. The only purpose for something like that is to get drunk faster, and so it kind of falls into those categories, like knowing people who will try and seek out, the beer on the menu with the highest ABV because they're trying to get
me. I'm just gonna say that was me. I like didn't even look at the name. I was just looking at the percentages. Just have to say.
Yep. And I had no immunity to that process either. Is that, especially going to a craft brew place, then it would be like, okay, well, I'm definitely going to look at that column. I'm certainly not indifferent to it,
right.
Which is kind of where I am now. But yeah, I think that the chasing of that feeling is something that can that can definitely lead to over drinking. I don't know how much that sets you back, honestly. Like, I think it's not a failure as long as you're compliant. But if your goals include, better health, spending less money, like all of these other things, then drinking a large amount is probably not what you came to the community for.
Yeah. Well, and I just think you hit it on the head there, because I think what I see when people are still chasing the buzz through TSM, oftentimes they've been on the method for 9 months, a year, and they're like, why am I stuck? And just what you said, like if your goals are better health or this or that, it's like those larger life goals that I think oftentimes we aren't even thinking of, because in my experience, I was just living for the next drink. I was living for the next day when I could have more to drink. And so these long-term goals, they might be in the periphery, but it wasn't something that I was necessarily working toward. And so for you, is that something you had, through your TSM journey? Are these larger goals that kind of kept you motivated? Because I think at the root of all this is like, you have to have motivation to approach a mindful drinking session and to have these goals and all of that. And so what kept you kind of on fire and working through TSM with this commitment?
Yeah, I think the one of the biggest things for me was, wanting to be, my best possible self, in a variety of ways, including my career, my personal relationships. Like, the amount that I was drinking, there really wasn't any aspect of my life that didn't suffer to some extent, right? Is okay. I let a friend down because I had made plans with them, and then I was too hungover to deal with it. I have another friend who lives further away, and I don't want to drive over there because then I know I have to drive back, which means I can't drink as fast as I want to, right? And so I'm missing out on a lot of experiences because I'm spending all of my time and energy trying to get as drunk as possible, as quickly as possible, for as long as possible. And and human beings are incredibly clever when it comes to getting what it is that their brain wants. And I was just speaking with somebody not too long ago, and we were comparing notes on how people who are deep into AUD and that dependence will arrange their life, including me, definitely around that. I'm going to make sure I don't have anything scheduled early in the morning because that means I can drink later at night. I'm going to make sure that I have plenty of liquor brought into my house on Saturday because in Texas, where I live, you can't buy liquor on Sunday. So I'm going to make sure that I have that planned out so that I don't run out of anything. I'm going to make sure I have an app on my phone that can deliver me more alcohol if I've gotten drunk to the point where I can't drive to go get more. I've got all the tools in place to bring as much alcohol into my system as possible. And so I think it's about finding something else that gives you joy and excitement and other things, because just sitting and not drinking really kind of sucks. And this is a lot of what the abstinence can be about. Like, okay, now my life has to revolve around going to meetings every day. Like, I love logging into Zoom support calls 1 or 2 times a week. I like to help other people out. I like to share my experiences. It's a positive experience for me. But for some people, it's an act of desperation. Like, well, if I don't go to this meeting, then you know what's going to happen. And so it becomes a burden. And people who are having constant burdens, if you're going to constantly be like, at war with yourself, and you'll hear, Annie Grace and others kind of talk about this cognitive dissonance where, your conscious mind knows that it wants to lose weight, have better health, all of these other things. But then that lizard brain, is the way some people refer to it, right, is just like, all I need is more alcohol. Like, my needs are simple: alcohol. And then your complex mind has all of these other lofty goals, but it tends to lose that argument because sooner or later willpower fails. And so that's where TSM steps in and replaces willpower to the point where it opens things up, and you can start exploring some of these other things that you cut out of your life because you've revolved your life around alcohol. That your life was entirely about alcohol. Now TSM it's giving you some windows. It's giving you maybe an evening back a week that you can do something, and it could be playing with your kids, jogging. It could even be like something passive, like going to a movie, just doing something else so that you're looking forward to other things. Like I know that's been a big part of the final leg of my journey, is let's have other things. So I embraced yoga to get the physical exercise, but also the relaxation and the sense of community. Being around other people in the yoga studio kind of fills you with that energy, and it satisfies that human need to spend time with other humans and be able to have that outlet, so that you don't, or in my case, prior to TSM and moving down this path, the only way that I got social interaction was going to a bar. Like, I had nothing else going on. I met all my friends at the bar. So even though we were friends outside of there, then we're usually meeting there or meeting at each other's houses, or, their lives were revolving around alcohol too. So it was easy to orbit each other. Now, that doesn't have to be the case. I still have all of the same friends and we still love to hang out. It's just that I only show up and hang out with them for, a couple hours. And then I go off and do other things, and I get up early in the morning and I make myself breakfast and all of the things that get neglected, when you've dedicated so much of your life to alcohol, the consumption of it, and then dealing with the guilt and shame of having consumed it and then coming right back around again. Like, it sucks up all the oxygen from your life. And so TSM lets you start breathing a little bit. It gives you a little bit of fresh air. And then you can build on that over time and then exploit those opportunities to do things.
Oh my gosh, so well said, Eric. That is absolutely spot on. And so I wanted to ask you if you wouldn't mind expanding on that a little bit, just because I've been a part of your journey the last couple of months as you've been doing this next leg of TSM and really like proactively seeking out other things like yoga. And I remember you saying like, you know, I've got to find groups where like, sure, I don't mind alcohol can be there, but it can't be the central focus anymore. Like we can't just be sitting around a table drinking beer. Like maybe I'll go bowling and there will be beer. I don't remember what your example was, but because I think that's honestly like as a coach, I think that's one of the harder parts for people is like being proactive about finding these other things. And of course, as humans, we like things that are familiar and comfortable. And so it's like, where do I even begin? So how has that process evolved for you? And what has it been like to see yourself kind of plug into these hobbies that you would never have done before and like really pour yourself into them like you pour yourself into, you know, when you were drinking so much?
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's really been a positive experience. The yoga for me has been multifaceted, is learning, thinking about and I know I've put a couple of posts in the Thrive community about these things, and things like a commitment to truth, because for so many of us, and definitely myself, the truth is sacrificed, is that you're hiding from people how much you're drinking. You're not wanting to admit to yourself what the reality is. And this is one of the things that I'll mention about logging is, I'd mentioned that I started logging early on, and I was consistent, but it was hard for me to get started because I didn't want to know what the number was. I didn't want to know how much I was actually drinking, because then I wouldn't be able to like pretend that everything was fine and normal, which of course I knew it wasn't. But there was something about a stark reality of slapping a number on it that was scary. And so there's a lot I want to replace those high numbers of alcohol with high numbers of other things, like how many miles can I hike this weekend, and how many hours can I spend doing yoga, and how many hours can I spend doing creative projects, and just just doing all of those things. And even really simple stuff, I found that you can get joy out of, or I could get joy out of, just just cleaning up the house is like that's something that in my heavy drinking days, I did the bare minimum, Katie. I was like, okay, we'll make sure that nothing is overtly soiled. And but there's like laundry on the floor, and there's like, okay, well, I'll get to that when I'm not hungover. I'll get to that when I'm not drunk. I'll get to that when I don't have to go to the bar to drink. And so you getting all of that back is empowering, is being able to spend that time and not have a problem, and being able to be there for friends. I know that more and more, as I'm having more alcohol free days than other days, and even on the days that I'm not alcohol free, I'm moderate to the point where I'm having 2 or 3. That there's been a number of occasions where a friend has gotten too drunk to drive. I can go get them, right? Because I'm not out there drinking with them. And then service to others is empowering. It's something else to fill in your life. It's like, instead of having to lean on somebody else and have them get you home or take care of you or something like that, you're the one that can be the caregiver, and that you're the one that can give of yourself. And that's something that I really wasn't expecting. It wasn't a goal of mine, to do that, but I found that, more and more as I came out of the fog, I wanted to do more things for other people, that I had more to give of myself, because I'm not squandering all of my energy on drinking.
Oh my gosh, yes. Same too. Like my house would be a disheveled mess, and I'd put off laundry and oil changes and car cleaning, and it was just chaos. And then it becomes doable. You're like, oh, it's actually not impossible to do the laundry. I thought it was much harder, but I was hungover, and that's why.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things when we talk about being mindful and like noticing things and noticing changes. It's like, I realized that a lot of what I didn't like about laundry was having to bend over and like reach into the dryer to pull stuff out. Why is that? Because if you're hung over, it doesn't feel good to put your head down below your waist, right? It doesn't feel good to bend.
To
And
move it
so it's
all.
like, oh, I don't hate laundry. I hate doing laundry hungover.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's so beautiful what you said too, just about like the other realizations you're having now that you're at extinction. Hank Reardon, I think we both know, he always calls it the gift of extinction. And like, what are you
Yep.
going to do with that gift? And it's just like
Mhm.
already what you're doing. It's like, like you said, being of service to others and like living more in truth. And for me, I always realized like one of the biggest thing I realized, and I think I made a video about this years ago, about like how drinking alcohol made me so out of integrity, which is kind of what you're saying. It's like you sacrifice all of these values that you have at your core because you're just compensating for your hangovers or your urge to drink or this or that. And so I feel like the gift of extinction, like you're embracing that. And it's just so awesome to see how it's already manifesting in your life. Only, you're right at extinction and you're already seeing these, awesome things come to fruition from it.
Yep. Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to ask you about, we've both talked about like all of the different tools that are out there for people
Mhm.
on the Sinclair method,
Right.
from drink tracking to mindfulness to habit change
Mhm.
to our community to the Facebook group. So like all of these different tools, like, and it's incredible that they're all there. And we know that
Mhm.
some tools work well for some people. I know you worked with a
Yep.
alcohol counselor, which was really helpful for you.
Mhm.
And other tools work better for other people. And so I wanted to hear from you kind of like your perspective, having applied all of these tools the past year, of like, how can people approach um, all of the tools that are out there, and like what worked well for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the first thing when it comes to all of these tools is that, being an engineer is pretty close to science. And so I kind of started thinking about it as a science experiment on myself. I'm like, okay, well, what happens if I try this? And there's all of these different suggestions to try, to especially when it comes to an extinction session, which I think is one of the probably one of the more challenging pieces for people. It certainly was for me, is that I found it much easier to just go alcohol free than to try and like keep my intake slow and to stop it at some point. Is that took much longer to get to that point for me in my journey. I know that's not always the case for everybody. Some people are like, oh, I found it really easy to get to, 2 glasses of wine a day, but I can't fathom doing an alcohol-free day. So it's different for everybody. But for me, that was the thing. So I looked for a lot of tools in that area of like, anything from like, well, set your drink out of reach, across the room or something. And that way you have to get up to go get it, forcing mindfulness on yourself so that you're aware of how fast you're drinking something. For me, logging my drinks at the time that I drank them was important because then I could see, oh, hey, wait a minute, I drank that one in 15 minutes. That's faster than normal. And so what does that mean? And being able to try to build that awareness. Is it better for me if I exercise in the morning or exercise in the evening? Does it matter? Is meditation helpful? Is it not? And so you'll find if you look at enough sources, you'll find a giant raft that no human being could ever learn them all or practice them. You know, it's just not practical, and it's also not necessary. Is that you have to find the things that will help you, and once you find the tool that unlocks that next step for yourself, then you've got it. You don't have to find another tool that would do the same thing. If you've figured out how to drink mindfully or to slow your intake or anything else, you've got that tool, you got that covered. You don't have to find other ways that also work. And so, for me, it was about trying different things until I could find it. Mentioning, that one of the ones for me that worked was when I go into an atmosphere, because my problem was always drinking socially. Like I would very rarely just be sitting in the house by myself and drinking. So I knew that those are the tools I needed. Other people who are drinkers at home or daily drinkers, they'll need different tools than mine. And that's why there are so many, because everyone is unique. So everyone needs a different set of tools. So nobody can just follow the method and say, aha, this is it. It's not like it's not like learning how to shoot baskets, where like there's a certain way that you're supposed to hold the ball and move, and that you can just replicate and teach it to everybody. Like this is a much more personalized type of thing. And so I think the idea is to just be open-minded, try something. Like it's a learning experience. You might try this tool and it didn't, you drank as much as you always did that day. Okay, maybe that tool didn't work. Maybe it just didn't work that time. You don't know. So you just keep experimenting. And if something's not working for you, then you don't keep pounding away at it. You try to find another angle, is kind of the way that I approached it. And so for me, the big things were logging. Journaling was really helpful to me, in the form of sometimes, a lot of times, online posts. Like, okay, whenever I was feeling, I learned to recognize the signs in myself that this feels like the kind of feeling that I get when I overdrink. And so what tools do I need to pull out of the box for that situation? And in a lot of cases for me, it was rereading some of my disappointed posts about myself, or if I wrote it in my journal, reading out of there, like, okay, I did it to myself again. Like, read that when you think you're in trouble. That was really helpful for me. Is like, oh man, do I want to write another one of these? No, I don't think I do. Let's think about how not to do that. And so, yeah, I would just say, there's a ton of material out there on Thrive and elsewhere, with suggestions, and that's all they are. They're not commandments. They're suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing you said too is like when you would drink log and you were logging it live. I know you use an app for the Android
Yep.
called Alcadroid, which I wish they had that for the iPhone, but I just think logging live as opposed to like the next day trying to chart them out, I think that is so much more helpful, because like you said, especially if you are timing it, oh, I drank that in 15 minutes, maybe this next drink I can pace it and time it for 30 minutes. It's just having that awareness can make all of the difference in the moment when we are.
Well, and that was one of the things, as far as moderation goes, for myself, is I started to notice a pattern that in the app that I use, it will estimate your blood alcohol content, right? I mean, one of the reasons they invented that particular app was for people who were driving, so that they could look and calculate and figure out, whether they were going to be safe or not. And so what I learned is that there was a certain level of alcohol where I would accelerate. Like I could look at my log and I could see it go from like a flatter line to like a steep line. I'm like, oh, that's the point where I'm drunk enough that I stop paying attention and I start just doing things automatically, right? And so knowing where that inflection point was meant now if I'm logging live, then I can know when I'm reaching that point before I get to the point where I'm going to say like, hey, I'm going to try and chase the buzz because I'm feeling a little something, but I want more of that now. And so recognizing that happens was a huge insight for me.
Absolutely. And you just made me think of a question, because a lot of people can still get drunk on naltrexone. You can drink through the medication. And so I know that that's happened to you a number of times. How have you navigated that? And like, what have you learned about yourself, and like what causes you to drink through the medication versus those nights where you just have 2 or 3?
Yeah, I think it's largely not paying attention and largely habits. And it's becoming less and less likely the more moderate extinction sessions that I have under my belt. The more 2 drink nights that I get, the more that becomes normal for my behavior, right? It would be abnormal for me to drink through it now, right? Is that I'll notice that I'm doing it now as opposed to it being the default, right? Is that that's something I have to kind of actively choose. And when might I actively choose to drink through? Well, a lot of times it's the socially driven, like, oh, well, you've suffered a terrible loss, of course you should get drunk, that's what all the people in the movies do. And that's like, oh man, that's terrible news, I need a drink. Like, okay, let's recognize what that is, and try and figure out a healthier way to approach those situations. And I think among other things, it was just trying to redefine who I am, for myself and not for anybody else. Is going up and saying, like, I'm not drinking tonight, as opposed to hedging my bets, which is what I did earlier on. Is that even on the nights that I decided to hang out with my friends and not drink, I would go in and I would equivocate, right? I would say, I don't think I'm going to drink tonight. Or, and now I feel comfortable just saying, no, I'm not, this is not a drinking night for me.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to do that this time. Maybe another time. Yeah. But yeah, I think a lot of it was habit, and a lot of it was externally driven. Is, if I'm hanging out with everybody and I haven't declared an intention, like, I have great supportive friends. It's not always the case from some of the stories I hear from people, but I have a great group of friends who want me to be happy, and so they're not intentionally like trying to get me to drink or get me drunk or any of that kind of stuff, but that's what they're doing. And so human beings have this innate desire to socially mirror, is that we try to do what the other people around us are doing. And so if if they're drinking and they're getting a new beer every like 20 minutes, then you start feeling like there's kind of a natural attraction to try and match that somehow, right? Particularly I've noticed, like, if you're all sitting at a table and somebody's like, hey, I'll get up and get another round, like, there's kind of an unspoken pressure, not from them, not from my companions, but from myself, like, oh wow, this is an opportunity to get it. I'm like, my beer's half full, but yeah, go ahead and get me another one, as opposed to, no, I think I'm good this round.
Yeah.
And building that, kind of it takes time. It took me time and effort to really get to that point where I'm not like, it isn't that bad if I have to go up there myself later. It is like, just drink what you want to drink. Don't drink because it's convenient.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so true. And you said something in there about along the lines of like redefining who you are. And like, we have a course video on changing your identity or something like that, because it is, when we're drinking for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, our identity can be so wrapped up in it, even from the beliefs around like, I'm a wine lover, or I'm a beer connoisseur, or I need wine to unwind in the evenings. And I think a lot of that can feed into these habits that are playing out, like where people are stuck in their nightly wine ritual when they cook dinner and after dinner. That's a common one. And it's like, why am I doing this even though I'm on naltrexone? And it's like going deeper to see like, well, what beliefs do you have about that? Or like, how do you view because we want to be in alignment with who we are believing ourselves to be. And so if we believe that we need wine to unwind in the evening, or that we are, a wine lover with all these wine subscriptions or whatever, it's going to feed into that behavior. So it's, interesting to hear you speak about that as well.
No, I think there's definitely a part of that. And what I came to understand is that my addictive voice in AUD wanted me to embrace the profile personality of being a drinker. I'm a proud drinker. Like, I can hold my liquor and I'll drink more than anybody, and I handle it better than anybody. I'm never I'm never an angry drunk. I'm never a sad drunk. Like I'm just a good, fun guy to be around, and boy, you have this mental image of yourself that's first of all distorted in my case, of like, oh, okay, this is what I think I'm being. I'm the life of the party. And then like I was fortunate to never see myself being videotaped in that state. But by proxy, going sober to a bar and then watching as other people go through the same progression I'd been through millions of times, I'm like, oh my God, they're insufferably boring. They're so loud. I mean, like the persona, right, is of the heavy drinker, is so embedded in our society and our culture of like, James Bond drinking his martinis. Like, can you imagine an actual, a secret agent getting loaded all of the time?
I
Like, I don't
never
think
thought
that
of that.
works. Like, I don't think that that would be a good thing to be doing if what you have to do is scale the outside of a building or like, scuba dive. Like maybe don't have the drinks.
I honestly never thought of that. And I am someone who like I would love like a neat whiskey because of like seeing, these famous actors in the movies do it. Oh
Yep.
my gosh. Oh man, that is hilarious. So, okay, I know we have to start wrapping up here, but I do have one more question for you, and that is
Yeah.
around alcohol-free days. Because I remember you wrote a post that was really
Yep.
good in the Thrive community about the importance of alcohol-free days. And
Mhm.
I mean, of course, we know alcohol-free days are crucial, and they're, the other half of the Sinclair method. Like, of course, drinking on naltrexone is part of it, but if you're just
Mhm.
drinking every day and not getting alcohol-free days and allowing endorphins from other things, you're going to be stuck in daily drinking, basically. So,
Yep.
how important were alcohol free days for you, and what was that like as part of this past year on TSM? Like, how did alcohol free days fit into all of that?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so first of all, starting out, I was not entirely a daily drinker. So I always had alcohol free days. Even before the Sinclair method, I had a smattering of alcohol free days. It's usually when I felt too miserable to even get out of bed, honestly, right? It's like I can't even face drinking today somehow. Because that was a line I didn't feel like I ever wanted to cross, into maintenance drinking. And I was wary because I knew that I was on that precipice. And so I would force an alcohol-free day here and there, but it wasn't like I did anything with those alcohol-free days. So what happened later is TSM kicked in, and as I was working through like, more of my therapy and things like that, started to use the alcohol-free day as, a way to really see the world, as it is, and not blurred by alcohol. And so like, okay, if I go to if I watch a movie, I'm going to remember the whole thing. Which, it sounds crazy to even hear it in my own ears. But yeah, I mean, like, how many times did I watch a movie and forget half of it because I had been drinking all day before I watched it? And how do I go, do this and do that? So, there were a lot of things about that, especially relating to exercise, is the endorphins that you get from exercise and from some other activities. For me, exercise was the big one. And so your brain wants endorphins. So to me, TSM, naltrexone, is going to block endorphins from any source. It's not specific to alcohol. So you're not going to enjoy, your walk or whatever if you were on naltrexone. And I found in particular that when I got to my second alcohol-free day, when they were back to back, that's when I really started feeling good. I really started feeling good about, how I felt. And, part of it is just, straight detox. Like, okay, I haven't had alcohol in my body for a couple of days. But I think part of it was also not being on the naltrexone for those days, so that my brain could be taught, well, it's not that we don't enjoy anything anymore, it's that we don't enjoy alcohol anymore. And so we can still, get that positive feedback in the brain for all the other things that are going to give you that same sense of reward. And to me, I think that was a key part of my retraining, is that I wanted more of those. Like, that was something that I used, when I was going for a longer stretch, back in August, which, that was only 5 months in for me. And I went alcohol free for 30 days. I did, Annie Grace has her alcohol experiment, and I followed along with the book and did a lot of the exercises. And I said, yeah, well, I think I could do 30 days, because I had done stretches of 6 and 7 days and I didn't feel a lot of pressure. And so I did go through those 30 days, and it was great. Things really kind of change as you get into that second week. And so that's a different kind of alcohol-free day. And I think that's probably, I'm kind of glad that I kind of stumbled into relating that August, right? Because November and December were heavy drinking for me. And so, I went from being alcohol free for 30 days to drinking for 6 days straight around the holiday. And having by then built the tools not to look at that as, oh, well, I did okay once, but, really this isn't going to work for me. And keeping that positive attitude, and having those alcohol free days are like a badge, is that I like to look at, not the streak, right, which is what abstinence people will look at. How many did you have in a row? But how many alcohol-free days did I have in January? And how many did I have in February? And how many did I have in March? And am I getting more and more alcohol-free days? Which just shows that, I'm getting my choices back.
Awesome. Is there anything else, Eric, you wanted to share while we wrap up today?
No, I think the only thing that I'll say is having reached extension, I do plan to continue to be active, in the support community. I think it'll be helpful for me, because it'll be a reminder, like I said, right, is that when I see people, who are having some problems, especially people who, have a similar background to myself, then it'll be a reminder to myself, not to be complacent, and to think, oh, well, I don't really need this naltrexone anymore because I don't have a drinking problem now. No, I will always have a risk, and I will always have AUD pathways. And the key is to manage it. And, just like I'm going to keep taking my hypertension blood pressure medicine, even though my blood pressure is good now, it's like, yeah, but if I stop taking the medication, it'll be bad again. Yeah. So maybe we keep taking the medication. And so that's really my approach, is to stay active in the community, not be obsessive about it, because I don't feel like I'm obsessive about it. It's not a situation where I feel desperate, because that's extinction, is that you lose that burden of having to be nervous. And I'm not all the way there. That's probably my post extinction hurdle, is to allow myself to relax. I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to suddenly unlearn all of the things that I learned over a year, and I'm going to do great.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I hear that from a lot of people. And I think that's a really good thing that's come from the AA program, is like the sponsee, or just that opportunity to give back. Because I know for me, like with my YouTube channel and other ways, also plugging into the community, it's been such a crucial part of me being recovered and healed and being able to pay it forward. So I just think that that's awesome that you're going to be doing that. And for people watching, if you're on the Sinclair Method, like if you're feeling at all that you think like giving back could be helpful for you, just like reach out to me or email me. I'd love to like support you in that, or point you in a direction, because I do think it's part of being healed from this, and staying, grounded in where you were and where you are now. So what a fun interview. Thank you so much, Eric. And congratulations on reaching extinction. I'm super, super happy for you. That's so encouraging. Yeah, thanks for chatting with me.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's always a pleasure talking to you too, Katie.
Okay, bye.